Hello, and welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast by Awaken Birth. I am co-host Alison Collins.
And I am co-host Nadia Taylor. We are radical Christian mothers and birth keepers who are passionate about Jesus and free birth.
On the podcast, we will share testimonies of Christian mothers from all across the world who have free birthed with Jesus, and we'll talk all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast. I'm Alison, a co-host.
And I'm Nadia.
And today we have Amelia as our guest. And Amelia is a good friend of both Nadia and I. So we're very excited to have her on the show and to hear her birth story of Theo. So maybe first off, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us your name and where you're from and a little bit about your Christian story, and then jump straight into your birth story.
Cool. Hi, I'm Amelia. My story. So I am generational Christian. So my mum came to the Lord well before I was born, not for my older siblings, but for me. And so I have never known a non-Christian household with my mum. My dad's side's a little different, but with my mum. I am also generational home birth. So being raised in a Christian home, I have a very spirit-led mother. She's very spirit-led, very in tune, very spirit-led goals, very mothering goals. I was actually, so I was a home birth. I was a breech home birth as well, which I love. I was out country breech. So I like to tell people I was born in a 3-sided shed on 40 acres breech. So, which is awesome. I love that. It's definitely what led me to feeling the need to home birth, because hospitals were the weird for me, not the other way around. So that's awesome. I have been a Christian, obviously, my whole life being raised, but I was 10 years old when I made the official dedication, and our pastor at the time was we were doing a baptism Sunday. Me and my older brother really felt strongly about wanting to be baptized, and our pastor was like a little concerned. He felt that we were a bit young, so he actually pulled us aside because he wasn't doing children's baptisms, and he pulled us aside and said, like, why? And I don't remember the reason why. It's what I am. I am in God, and God is in me, and that's just something I've always felt from a really young age. So I was baptized in the community, in the church pool, and wasn't long after that I also received the gift of tongues, and have had that since I was about 10 years old as well. So that's something that I use daily. So that is my birth story. Both my children were home births, and I'm pretty excited to tell them. So my 2 stories. So I have 2 beautiful boys and Theo, and they have very distinct names and meanings in their names too. With Arthur, he was a planned pregnancy. My husband and I got married in August 2019, and it wasn't long after that we actually had a pregnancy scare while I was still on the pill, and I was a little bit not concerned, but just was like, okay, well, I don't want to take that month's pill in case I am pregnant. And then when I came, and so I wasn't pregnant, and so I just stayed off hormonal contraception and went detoxed and everything, which was really awesome to go through because it changed my whole outlook as well. It changed significantly our marriage too early on, because I felt, all those hormonal changes that you don't realize that you're suffering from. So we then we started trying when we had that conversation, said, are we ready? And we're like, yeah, let's do this. And so we started trying, and it was a couple months, and we fell pregnant and were over the moon, I just was like, well, my husband was really, he's got, a nurse grandmother and all that sort of thing. So he was really like, I want to do a hospital. And I was like, that's not right. That's not normal for me. I just wasn't for me. And so we looked at what the options were. And being a 2nd-gen home birther, I was raised in the home birthing community, old school home birthing community, where we would meet up at, the the local, whoever's house it was a real community-based thing. It was very relaxed. All the kids would run wild and feral. We'd all be eating. There'd be barbecuing, and it was a friendship. So my mum has had a couple of different midwives back in the day. And so what I really found interesting was when I was starting our journey, I was like, okay, I want a home birth. So we started our journey trying to find a midwife, and I couldn't find one. It's really hard to find what I wanted, a really natural, holistic, faith-based approach. Birth is normal, natural, and God's, plan for women, and I didn't need anyone to control that. And so I found it really, really hard to find a midwife who supported what I felt a midwife should do, someone who was just there to oversee and, support as opposed to control, which is what I grew up with. So we settled on what we thought at the time as the best approach. We found a clinic in our local region who did, had rights at the local hospital. So my husband felt a bit more relaxed. He was like, okay, cool. They've got rights. He felt like, if something goes wrong, we got someone there. And so we started, going down that route. So we found, a clinic, and it was very clinical, and it was really clinical. And for me, I was really young in my, mothering journey, and I wanted that old school approach where women communicated and bonded and grew together in, your pregnancy journey and everything. And it was a really hard approach for me. So, and my mum, who I said early on, like my mum, she's birthed 6 kids, 5 at home, including me, which was breech. She has been a support person for so many women, home and hospital. My mum she would be what you would call the old school type of, we're going back, back in biblical terms, how a midwife would, she's very aware, very knowledgeable, and very on the job training sort of thing, as well as, birthing herself. So I was like, mum and husband, they're being there. It was a non-negotiable for me. I was like, my mum's my best friend. She's going to be there. And so it was a really hard approach when the midwife that we were allocated at the clinic was used to women who this was their first introduction to home birthing. So, she come across as someone who was very, in control. This is what I like to give, and this is how I recommend you do it, and everything, which just didn't work for us. Mum and our midwife butted heads significantly. There was a big, thing which caused a little bit of actual tension. And there were times where I'd leave, monthly appointments going, I feel really trapped because we didn't know navigating the home birth community these days is really hard, and navigating, especially for a holistic approach, it's just really not out there for a midwife option because they're too controlled by the laws, especially in Australia. So we butted heads a lot, and Mum and I were praying the entire time. We were going Lord, just, clear the pathway. This is yours, your design. So clear the pathway, whatever tension, whatever. And my mum was really feeling stressed, and she didn't express this to me until after Arthur was born, but she was really stressed because she didn't want to bring her own tension into my birth space. And so she was constantly praying, Lord, if I'm not meant to be there, then delay me. But if I am meant to be there, remove the tension and whoever. And so that was something we, towards the very end of my pregnancy, Mum and I sat down and we had a prayer and we said, Lord, we're very invested financially, as well as we're very late in my pregnancy. I didn't know what to do. And unfortunately, I have really terrible veins. I'm not easy to draw blood on a good day. So my whole pregnancy approach, which I didn't love, was they were to take blood tests. They'd have to actually take them from my knuckles because they couldn't get it. So my midwife became really, really antsy and paranoid that in an emergency she wouldn't be able to cannulate me. And that's something she started really every appointment. She was like, I won't be able to do it. And so we went from I got my husband on board, we're going to home birth and everything, to at 37 weeks at our home visit, she sat down and said, I'm not comfortable having a home birth with you. You're going to have to hospital birth. And at 37 weeks, I was just devastated. And didn't know what to do. And so we just prayed and said, like, Lord, once again, I don't believe the hospital system is right for me. It's certainly not right for, the approach that I trust in you for. And we prayed, we said, Lord, take control over my birth. So I went into labour and it was great. I had my bloody show at 8 a.m, had a really easy, pre-labour, everything. I just sat there on my own. My husband loves that I tell this story. He actually had tickets to the footy and that's a big thing because we're being in the Brisbane region. We don't have the NRL. We don't have the NRL up here very often. And he's a Penrith Panthers supporter, which is very important. And so it was a very special game that he was going to go and see. So we talked about it and I was like, look, it's fine. It's early labour. I can call you. Go to the footy. I should have communicated better with him that I was actually in active labour. So he was enjoying the footy with some drinks with his mates and everything. And that was fine. I just rested, ate watermelon. It's what I do in labour. I love watermelon. And my mum got there at about 5 and it was a really relaxed day. And I just trusted and just, had everything. And then we started timing. And at 5 o'clock, mum's like, I just really feel that you can no longer talk through these contractions. So I think we should start timing, not timing as in you're on a schedule, just so that we had a gauge. And so I let my midwife know that, we had started timing and she was like, no, it's too early. Like you're only 38 weeks. Like, I don't think this baby. And we're like, okay, well, I think this baby's coming. And she was disagreement. I let her know that. So it was getting stronger and I just laboured at home, me and mum in the quiet. We just really, I just laboured and the labour got more intense. Arthur was actually posterior, so I was feeling all my contractions in my back. It was strong. It was intense. It was definitely something that, it was definitely starting to get to me. Just I needed to walk. I needed to walk in labour and stand and move and everything, and that was great. My husband got home at about 10 o'clock at night and I was a little bit sauced, and he walked in to me counting a contraction out on the wall, physically going like that. And my husband just was like, he tells people nothing sobers you up faster than walking in on your life through having a contraction. Yeah, so he was home, I was ready, and so we had the hospital bag packed because at that stage we were like, well, we're still transferring to hospital. It's just not an option, which I was really stressed about. I went to bed. I was like, I need to have a sleep. Let's, have a sleep and rest. And I laid down and in the entire time I was asleep, I couldn't get comfortable. Every time a contraction I'd have to get out of bed. And they were roughly every 15 minutes at that stage and really strong. It was about 1 a.m. when they got I couldn't bear it anymore. I was like, these are really intense, really strong. And so my mum's like, she's like, I feel it's time to call the midwife. And so we did. And my midwife got there at so we called her about 1:30 and she got there at about 3. And on the phone to her, I remember her going, I don't think you're actually in labour. I don't think you're in active labour. I think you're just scared of the pain. And I remember going, no, it's just bleeping painful. No, I'm not scared. So she gets there and, she was really, I think she just, I don't know. She just didn't want to admit that I was in labor. She was really insistent that, no, it's too early. You're not, your contractions aren't regular. You're not, it was 3 in 10 for an hour. And then that's when she was supposed to come. So because I was never consistent, I was like, they would come really close and then they'd have a break and all that sort of stuff. So I was starting to, because my pain was really unbearable and I couldn't sleep. And she was like, you need to rest. You're going to have a big day tomorrow. When active labour hits, you're going to need to really have a rest for it. And so she recommended doing a saline injection in my back to try and separate the nerves from so that to block the pain as best as you can. You do 4 needles on your back. And I did 2 of them, which is just saline water under the skin. And the second one, she like pushed the saline through as I had a contraction, and I just screamed. I was like, I'm not doing any more of this. I can't do it. That's too painful. So I went home. I said, no more. I said, I need a shower. I want to like wash this off. Like, it was horrible. And she said, look, you need to really rest as much as possible. I'm going to go home and going to go to bed, and you need to get comfy. Mitch needs to go to sleep. Like, everyone needs to really rest. And so it was 4:00 in the morning and she left, and I had a shower. I wanted to try and labor in the bath. And so I asked my husband, and so he filled up the bath. I couldn't get comfy. I had 2 contractions in the bath and it wasn't for me. So I got out and my husband went to bed. We turned off all the lights, and Mum and I just sat there in the lounge room. We made as much of a cocoon as I could, but I couldn't lay down. I couldn't sleep. My contractions, as soon as they would hit, they were really strong. And they were lasting for a minute. They were really strong. And so I remember they were just getting worse, just stronger, not worse, but stronger. And my mum was like, okay. And so she was massaging my back with oil. We were doing the hot towels on my back. We were doing all those things. And I remember I started to get fear and stuff going, if this is pre-labor, I'm not going to be able to handle actual labor. And so I remember screaming out. I was on my hands and knees. I remember screaming out and going, God, you created this baby. You need to do something about it. This is too much. I can't. I was starting to go, I'm going to need drugs at the hospital. I can't do this for 12 more hours. Then I had a strong contraction and I turned. So, and I remember having it because I screamed. I tried to run away. I actually rolled off the couch, ran and punched the wall. I wanted to every part of me was trying to run away from it. At that moment, I got all this bear down pressure and ended up relieving my bowels on a towel on the floor. And because it was all down my leg, I was like, I want to hop in the shower. And by this stage, it's 5:30 in the morning. So it's not actually been that long. And I was in the shower washing off and I had another serious contraction, and Arthur finished his turn. And I remember slipping because I was holding onto the shower head. I slipped in the shower and just hit the wall and slid down the wall. And my mum was like, okay, I don't know how we're getting her to hospital. This is not happening. So she went and woke up my husband, and my husband jumped out of bed. And we called our midwife and her phone was off. So her phone was off. And so we couldn't. And then my husband went and looked up the backup midwife's number, and we called the backup midwife. And while on the phone, she heard me have a contraction, and she's like, we're not making it to hospital. That baby is coming. And I was like, and by this stage I'd hit transition. I remember saying, going, Mummy, something's wrong. It burns. And so everyone's like, the baby is coming. So my mum, because we were not prepared for the home birth that we wanted but weren't prepared for, my mum just cleared everything out of our cupboard. She just made this beautiful cocoon on the floor. I was laying on the couch. I rolled off the couch and was kneeling, and I just got all this bear down pressure, and I just said, Mum, I think I need to push. And she's like, babe, you push. If you need to, you listen to your body. And I bared down with all my might, and Arthur crowned. While on the phone to the midwife, my husband was on the phone to the midwife, and she's like, what's happening? And he's like, I can see the head. And so she's like, okay, I'm 5 minutes away. I'm on my way. And then I got a second big contraction and I pushed. And normally it goes crown to shoulders and then shoulders to birth. Well, I pushed and he went crown to all the way out. So I was kneeling on the floor with all these blankets because he just slid out straight onto the towel. And then all of a sudden it was just everything, and time just stood still. Everything, my mum just quickly, she's like, Mitch, you need to come here and hold your wife. And she just turned Arthur over and she's like, yep, he's breathing. He's a little boy. It's great. And then, so she passed him through my legs and onto my chest, and we just got a nice blanket, and I just sat on the couch and I just sat there holding my baby. And the midwife comes running in, and then our original midwife comes running in 5 minutes later, and there was just like all this bustle of, oh my gosh, the baby's here. Like, how did that happen? And it was like, I wonder. And then, so it was really good. I birthed the placenta like 40 minutes later. Like, everything was really, I actually wasn't prepared mentally to birth the placenta. And that's something I really expressed to people. I wasn't mentally, like, I needed to rest. It had been really intense. You know, there was a lot of uncertainty, no control, chaos, you know, not around me was the chaos. Like, I was always in control. I never felt unsafe. I was always really reassured. Like, my entire labor, even when I started going, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, this is going to be too much, I still felt safe. I still felt secure. I was never stressed or felt in danger. So, but I remember sitting on the couch and they're like, do you want to, I think the placenta's ready. Do you want to try and birth it? And I remember saying, I'm not ready to stand. Like, I'm not ready to move. I'm happy just sitting here. And so they were like, no, we highly encourage you to, you know, try and birth the placenta. Now, my placenta was ready to birth, but I wasn't ready to birth it. So that's something I was like, it made me feel a little bit, all the, like, that just pushed me in a way. I was just like, it just took a little bit out of me because I had to actually mentally release those muscles that weren't ready. So it was just, and then, you know, but I still love that I got, like, I know that it would have been way more, you know, if I was in hospital, they would have put a cannula in me and they would have done all these things because that's what the fear and the scareness was. And I was really something that I really didn't want to. I knew that was going to be, that would have interrupted. So even though my midwife did leave, that was God, because Mum never was scared. Like, I had such a strong support network. My husband, who was still feeling nervous, you know, it was his first baby, first time experiencing birth, all that sort of stuff. So he was still, even in labor, he was still feeling, you know, just those new dad jitters that he didn't experience with Theo's birth. And so the whole thing, even though it was chaotic and, you know, midwives leaving, it was God's plan. He was like, no, this is not what's happening. We're going to, you know, this baby's going to be right. And so, and then that was lovely. And, you know, I did the newborn postpartum part and it was awesome. But me and my husband were one and done. So I loved my birth. I loved my little boy, and we were it was great. Like, you know, I started getting my body back and I was able to do things, and I was, you know, over a year old, and, you know, was having bigger gaps in his breastfeeding and all these things. And we're not even sure, like, God had another plan. So my husband was even talking about going and getting the snip. He was ready, like, and everything. And I just remember going, like, it was a weekend and I was like, what? I said to him, I was like, my period's like 3 days late. And so we were like, no. And and so I was like, I just all of a sudden got like, I need to go and do a test. And it was Sunday afternoon. And normally the tests tell you to do it first thing in the morning when the hormones are higher and stronger and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, it's Sunday afternoon. I was like, no, I really need to do this test. And so I went to Woolies and got my test and came home and did it. And I was like, okay. And I just started laughing. I was just like, what? And so it was just really funny because I just started laughing, and then we, you know, me and my husband, but I was so angry with God. I remember I actually had to go to the healing rooms, which if you don't know what the healing rooms are, look them up. They're amazing. And I had to go and have some prayer to process that, like, my plan, I planned up and that was everything. And God said, cool, you can have a little bit of control with the first, but this is my plan for you. And so, so we did. And I just as soon as I found out I was pregnant, everything, I was like, I'm not doing that again. Like, I'm not paying someone thousands of dollars to gaslight me. I'm not. And I just I just really felt strongly that, well, God did this. This was his baby, his plan. Like, this was completely out of our control. I don't need to do anything. Like, it is what it is. If anything, like, you know, if there's anything wrong with my baby, anything like that, I completely surrendered to his plan. So we started looking, and I said to my husband, I want a free birth, and he was a little bit nervous too. So we did have a couple of meetings with a couple of different midwives, and it just didn't feel we couldn't click. I was like, I didn't click with anyone. It just still felt, and the more we talked, the more like, it's just too medicalized, they're too controlled. And for me, I was like, that goes against, I can't. And something really important for us was when we did our 20-week scan with Arthur, I didn't really feel the need to do a lot of scans, but we did the 20 weeks. We wanted to find out boy or girl. I hated having his heart, like with the Doppler, he would swim away from it, he would kick it. So when I went for my 20-week scan, he curled into a ball. He was trying to get away from it. And I remember the technician was so angry because, they've got to get all the points and check everything, that he physically tapped my stomach with the scope. And, he was like, he verbalized, he's like, just move. And I was just like, still not as empowered as I am now. I would have punched him these days. But as a young man, like, I remember looking at my husband and we both like lit up. Like, I was just like, oh my God, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, how do I, and it was it was really overwhelming. So, and it made me really angry that someone was so angry with my baby. Like, that really, really tipped me off. And so I said straight away to my husband, I said, I'm not doing another scan. Arthur hated it, so I'm not doing it. I was like, and he just went, okay. So I was like, so when I said to the midwife we were interviewing, and I just said, no, I'm not doing any scans. And she's like, I highly recommend the 20-week scan in case of placenta previa. And I was like, no, like, I just feel that if there's going to be placenta previa, there'll be other warning signs. And my mum's there because my mum's comes to my appointments. It's what she does. And so she, as someone who has experienced, not herself, but witnessed placenta previa in girlfriends, had said, there's other signs. And, and they had a little bit of back and forward just argument. It was it wasn't half as bad as my original midwife, but it was definitely, there was a tension there. And I all of a sudden felt stressed. And I was like, I am not going through this again. And so, yeah, so I said, so then we were just okay. And I said to my husband, I said, I'm not doing this. And I said, I want a free birth. And my husband was like, really still at the stage. He's like, because free birth, I think, gets a little bit of a dangerous name because it means that you're vulnerable. And for someone who doesn't know how not to, like someone who feels vulnerability in a negative way, that's an overwhelming feeling. And I was like, it's okay. Sometimes vulnerability is a good thing. Like, that's, vulnerability in a marriage is how you connect and all that sort of stuff. And to me, it felt really, I was like, no, so I had a doula friend who I, went over, and her and her husband had us for lunch, and we sat down and we talked about it, and her husband sat down with my husband and they just talked about, what it was. And he just all of a sudden got so empowered. And, the biggest thing, so with our first midwife, the fear of bleeding out and not being able to cannulate was something he was still really holding on to. So when we really sat down as a really open, couple group and with support and talked about it actually looks different in different women. Blood loss is completely subjective to different women. All of a sudden, he just had no fear. He just felt he's like, okay then. So we we went home, and he just turned around and goes, I'm on board. And so we loved that. So yeah, so with Theo's whole pregnancy, I didn't have any test. I didn't even really see a doctor. I really trusted my own body. We did go and have a GP appointment, just interviewing family GPs anyway. And, so she, she checked my heart, like my blood pressure and all that sort of stuff. And she's like, you're doing good. And she's like, okay, here's the blood test that we'd like you to, recommend you do. And I was like, cool. I just never got around to doing it, not because I was adverse. I had no issues. I'm like, never hurts. Blood tests, there's not really much, they're fine. It's good to know. But it just never happened, and I still got that sheet. And I just kept thinking, I should go and do that. But the thought of having blood taken out of my wrist went, not today though. And all of a sudden, all of a sudden I was high enough in my pregnancy that I just was like, I started to notice in myself that I was getting a bit fatigued and everything like that in the third trimester. And I was like, so I just naturally started taking some herbal iron just to, boost myself up. And, it never hurts to take a bit of extra iron when you're pregnant anyway. And so that's the only really thing I did. My labor, however, with Theo was completely different. I was waiting for some sort of a sign like, him dropping or something like that. And we were at the time convinced that Bub was a girl. We went off of my dates. We were all convinced Bub was a girl. So we were calling a girl and we were going her, and we had a name and we were using that name. And so my husband, we had a few times where we were like, baby's dropped, she's coming. And then within a few hours, go straight back up again. So we were like, there was about a week that we're like, what's going on? And so one night I was just like, my walls just looked filthy. So my husband was at work and me and my son, I got the sugar soap out and we were scrubbing the walls, and and I spent probably 4 hours scrubbing my entire walls. And I needed to go to the toilet, and my husband called me. He was on his way home and he was ducking into the shops, and he's like, what do you need? And I looked down in the toilet and I had my bloody show. And I just said, I don't really need anything except some watermelon because I've just had my show. And he's just like, okay. Last time I had my show and it was, game day. So he called his boss on his way home and said, change of plans, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I was probably coming. And, so we set all the balls in motion. So, and that was Wednesday. So Thursday he had the day off work. I had a chiro appointment already booked in. So I went to my chiro appointment. Me and my husband went for lunch and, had a really relaxed day. My mum got there Wednesday night. I called my mum and said, I just had my show. And she's like, I'm on my way. We were all convinced that as soon as I went into labour, this baby was just coming. So mum got here like at 9:00 Wednesday night. So she watched Arthur while we went to the chiro and went and had lunch. Even my chiro was like, yes, this baby is definitely in position, but not low. We kept going, like Bub was still really high and hadn't dropped. And so my chiro did say, but she's like, your hips are wider, and she's like all these things. And so we went home and everything was fine. And I was just standing there at the kitchen table and I had this really strong contraction, and I just sort of turned around to mum and said, time to get the book out. It's time to start timing. And everyone just was like, okay. And we had a big plan with this birth that my sister was going to watch Arthur. So we had, my doula for me, or my birth keeper for me. We had my mum and my husband there as well. And then my sister was coming to watch Arthur, specifically as Arthur's person, so that, he was just entertained and supported, and, they could go out if he needed something to eat, like that way. But a couple of weeks before that, my sister fell over and tore her ACL and was on crutches. So my sister and sister-in-law came and to watch Arthur. And so I had this very full house. So by this stage, it was about 8:00 at night, and, my family got here and it was great, but things just weren't settled, and I could hear music, and I like quiet. I like quiet stillness for my labours. I'm not someone who wants lights on or music playing or anything. I like stillness. And so everything was like, they were all in another room, but it was still a bit loud and everything. So I went into the bedroom and I could hear noise, like I could hear singing and music. And turns out my neighbour had decided to throw a little bit of a party on a Thursday night, which totally just invaded my space. So my family all got here and they were all excited, and, it was still early enough in the night and everything, and my labour just stopped completely. And I just got so angry. I was so irritated. And I remember messaging and being like, this is really frustrating and everything. And then, so we just decided that's it, we're all going to bed. So it was, 10 o'clock or whatever, and we went to bed and everything. And, I just remember going like, Lord, that me and my mum, so I had a shower and I called my mum in, and while I was in the shower, I said to mum, I said, things just don't feel right. So mum and I had a prayer, and I said, Lord, just what is the frequency that's invading my space? Because it needs to stop. Like, I didn't know why. I just all of a sudden felt so unsafe and suffocated. And so, that's when we were all like, okay, it's time to go to bed, everyone. We had that prayer, and I had a couple of more contractions. I was like, oh, is it going to happen? So mum had a coffee, and nope, nothing happened. So like I said, so we all went to bed at about, 10:30 at night. And my mum had just finished a coffee, so she's sitting there up, and so she got everything ready. She got like the table ready with all the supplies, everything that we'd need for birth and everything. I got woken up at about, I think it was 1. I got woken up to a significant contraction, and I remember I was laying in bed and I had this contraction, and I couldn't move because my son was sleeping next to me. So he was cuddled up next to me, and I was like laying down for this really strong contraction. I just remember going, I can't move. That's fun. And so then it stopped, and I just laid there for a little bit more, and then another one I started feeling it, and because I didn't get woken up this time, I quickly checked the time, and I was like, okay. And so I realized, I was like, okay, so they were about 10 minutes apart. And so that one, and so I texted my mum and just said, hey, just had a contraction. This is how long it was for. And she sent me a thumbs up back, and I was like, she's awake. So then I just stayed laying there in bed again, and I had another one. And I was like, okay, not doing this. So they were almost exactly 10 minutes apart for 3. And I was like, okay. So I got up and I came into the front room and sat on the bed with mum, and she's like, we getting up? I said, we're getting up. And so we just decided not to wake anyone up. It was just me and mum. I said, can you cut me up some watermelon? And so she cut me up a bowl of watermelon, and I just, I was sitting there on the berth, on the medicine ball, like just, rocking my hips and everything. And I would have a contraction. I'd have to stand. I just couldn't do anything. I tried kneeling for a contraction, like kneeling and leaning over the medicine ball. I actually threw the medicine ball across the room after that contraction and told it to go F itself. So my mum casually picked up the ball and took it to the front room and removed the ball. And so and that was my entire labour. I couldn't stand. I couldn't do anything but stand. If I would sit, if I would kneel, it was just, I was getting all this pain and it just couldn't. So my husband reckons I walked about 5 Ks during labour for that one. Yeah, I just didn't stop. So I had my watermelon and everything. It was about 2:30-ish that we woke up my husband and called my birth keeper and everything like that. And and so I just really relaxed. By then I was starting to make groans. I was having to breathe through the contractions. They were getting stronger. And they were lasting for decent time, like 50 seconds to a minute for a while. And I had a really strong contraction at one stage that actually lasted for 1:16. And it started at my front and wrapped all the way around and finished for 1:16. And I just remember going, this needs to stop. Like, oh my gosh. And I was like standing there like paralyzed going, it needs to stop. And it was just, so we were doing all the things. I did hot towels in the shower. And because we'd filled up the birth pool, because I was going to have a water birth this time. So we filled up the birth pool, and I was very aware that we were going to run out of hot water if I stayed in the shower. So I would just stand there in the shower, and then as soon as a contraction would happen, I'd just like turn it on full ball on just hot and let it wash the contraction away. And then as soon as the contraction finished, I would turn the tap off. And we just kept it all really dark. We kept the whole house dark. I just had a really nice red light going in the bathroom. And by this time, my whole family was, up, but everyone was just staying away. My husband at one stage, by accident, just got in my path when I was pacing, and I growled at him. And my mum just said, Mitch, remember the birth ball? She will do that to you. So my husband, just like a very good, supportive husband, went and sat on the couch and just stayed. He's like, I'm going to stay there. And he was really supportive. He'd be like, do you want some water? Do you want a Snickers? What do you want? Do you want a lolly? He's like, I'm staying in my spot and I'll offer things. It was really good. Yeah, so I hit transition while in the shower, and I was exhausted by then. I hadn't stopped. It would have been, I don't remember the times, but I know it would have been 4:35 in the morning, and I was just in so much pain. The contractions were lasting over a minute, but they were coming every 2 minutes. So I was only getting 50-second breaks between contractions for over an hour at this stage it had been. So my mum actually stopped timing at 5. She's like, by the time she'd write it down, another one was happening. So it was 5 o'clock when she stopped timing. And I was just starting to go, I'm really tired. I'm exhausted. And so I was like, I need to lay down. So we went and got all the puppy pads and put them all over the bed. And I was like, I need to lay down because I can't stand. My legs were sore. It felt like I was hiking. My legs were hurting, and I was starting to just go, I was never scared. I was just over it. And so I tried laying down and had a contraction laying down. I didn't like it. And then I tried to labor in the pool, had a contraction in the pool, didn't like it. I had to be standing. I had to be moving. So so I was too tired. So by this stage, I was starting to get bear down pressure and nothing was happening. Bub was still really high. And I was like, I remember I was on I actually was doing all the positions to just try. I was on my hands and knees. I was leaning forward. We actually had 3 pillows piled high that I could rest my head on, and I had my butt in the air. We were trying all the positions to get Bub to move. And I remember saying specifically going, Lord, something needs to happen. I said, this baby needs to come or I need a nap, because I said, I need a break. I'm so tired. My muscles, I was like, So I had 2 very strong contractions with no pain. And there was just no pain. It was all pressure, but no pain. And for those 2 contractions, it was only a couple of minutes. I had a power, quick re-gap. I was able to refocus, because I remember saying that I was getting all the bed down. I was like, she's not coming. I said, she can come, but she's not coming. And I remember going, so we sat there, and it was really, it was really interesting, because I was never, I knew that we had a couple of options that if we got in the car and made it to hospital, that was going to be a real nightmare. And so we all just started praying. My mum got on her hands and knees and was holding my hands, and we just had a prayer, and we just prayed that whatever the hindrance was, whatever the resistance was, whatever it was that was stopping Bub from coming, God clear the pathway and, give us that space. And I all of a sudden got all this pressure, and I was like, that's it. This baby is coming. And so I forced myself up. It was almost like in the movies where it's you're fighting a force field. I forced myself up, power walked to the birth pool and just dived like a whale, did the splits, which opened up my pelvis in a way that Bub was able to slip into the birth canal. And I just water all over the floor. It was my sister seen it. She was on the couch and she's seen it. She watched it. She was the only one who actually really got to witness the full effects of me whale diving into the birth pool. And I was on my hands and knees, and I just started bearing down, and I had this really, really strong contraction, and I pushed with all my might, and Bub come down, and then I felt Bub go straight back up. And I was she's not staying. I actually said, she's not staying, she's not coming, she's going back up. And so everyone was like, okay. And so I remember I was leaning over the birth pool. My husband was holding on to me. Like I was just leaning into him. And I had to just focus with everything. And I had this really strong contraction and I forced Bub down, and then I held my muscles tight and was like, you're not leaving. So Bub couldn't go back up, and I had to like hold those muscles, and I had to wait until the next contraction could come and I could push again. And so that's happened, and that's when I just remember pushing and pushing until all of a sudden Bub crowned. And I remember, everyone was like, so, with the flashlights out and what's happening, and, yeah, that's ahead, and it was good. And I remember looking over my shoulder, like I had that, the crowning, and I remember just looking out over my shoulder and seeing daybreak. And it was really pretty. The clouds were just starting to, and it was like that beautiful pink and blue, and there was like this gold on the clouds, and it was just like daybreak. And my spirit lifted. Like I just felt this strong, it's time. And then I just leaned and I just was like pushed with all my might. And yeah, Bub was born, and my mum lifted Bub out of the water, and we're all like, oh, she's here. And then my mum looked down and goes, Bub's a boy. And we're all like, oh. And so my instant reaction was, I love him already. I just was like, all my joy, all my, everything. And yeah, I just was, so then I was like holding, but the cord was really short. So I was laying, and I was at the wrong end. So the birth pool I had, a seat and everything at the other end. I was at the deep end so when I was like leaning into the birth pool, Bub had come through my legs and was on my chest. I actually couldn't, I kept like, and Bub was covered in the white membrane stuff that I can never remember the name of, and was really slippery. And I kept like dropping him back into the water as I'm trying to bring him out. And the really funny thing about that is with Arthur, he was born, had a quick suckle, and then he didn't really want to drink for 24 hours. Theo was born and he was like, okay, give me the milkies. He was ready and he was like trying to suck, and he was sucking his fingers, and I was like, you need to wait. I need half an hour. So we had to I needed to sit in the pool properly. So we all shuffled baby around, and I got to the other end and was sitting on the chair so that I could hold him properly. And I just had it was a completely different experience. I just was sitting there, and all of a sudden I just seemed because I was in the pool and actually was watching and aware of what was going on, I was so present this birth, that I seen I was like, the placenta's coming, and I just had this contraction, and it just with natural instinct just ejected it. And it was really cool because I didn't even have to think about it. It just was ready. And that's why I really feel it was really important that I knew the difference between being mentally ready and not. And so the placenta, and it was just this big, and it was just whoosh, and every contraction pain just went with it. I physically felt all of a sudden I was just at peace, and I was just like, oh. And so Mum, took Theo, and we scooped the placenta out, and Mum was just holding Bub and sitting on sitting near me. And, Theo was really ready for a drink. And I said, I just need a minute to process this. So we started emptying the pool, and I just stayed in the water while everything and just let it all soak in and everything, and just my muscles and everything. And it was just really, it was so intense and so powerful. The fact that everything, and I know that there are so many, things that could have just been if we didn't just lean into it, it would have been way more stressful. And so I was able to, so then I birthed the placenta and the pool, and I got out, and then I was able to take Bub and put him on, and then, my son, everyone, and it was really sweet. My son actually made a comment when he came over, so when I was holding him, and he goes, tummy gone, baby. And he was just so aware, and it was just so beautiful that he was actually there and able to acknowledge that mummy had a baby. Like, he got to experience that with us. Like, it was really lovely. And so, just uniting as a family. And then, and it was just a way more postpartum contraction pains were way more intense this time, but I was just way more relaxed and in control. I didn't feel the need. Like, I was constantly on the go the next day as opposed to needing to rest and sleep. Like, this time I was like really present. I just wanted to, sit there. I was happy for others to hold Theo, but I just wanted to sit there and soak up the presence. And it was really just peaceful.
Thank you so much for sharing your birth story. Like, it's honestly amazing to hear women every time.
Well, two main things that I really heard, because you're the first one that has had where you had a home birth with a midwife first and then had a free birth.
Yeah.
So that's something that's like, it's trying to find some uniquenesses in everyone's story, right?
Yeah.
And I remember you saying how in some ways that, the first time, you didn't feel, especially in the beginning or later in the labor, that you didn't really feel supported from the midwife. Like, she didn't believe you. She didn't think you were really in labor. And you just obviously would have had a hard time second guessing, I guess, because it was also your first labor.
Yes.
And knowing like how much of that might have slowed things down versus if the midwife would have been like, yep, you know your body, I trust you, you're doing what you're doing, the slightest differences.
Yeah.
And with your second pregnancy, you noticed early on that almost those red flags coming up. And it's so good that you started to recognize that before you got, heavily pregnant in your pregnancy, and to start to go, no, actually, I want to set safe boundaries. Because I just posted today about having healthy and safe boundaries especially as a Christian.
Yeah.
And so it's just so good that you recognized that and was like, I don't want that to affect this journey and this birth experience and to hold me back. And I trust myself and I trust my body can do it. Yeah. Especially, and like, the placenta too. Like, I was just going to add with, you noticed after the first birth, even though, again, you hadn't ever done this before, you could tell in yourself, like, I'm not ready to give birth to my placenta.
Yeah.
And it was really important because my placenta was ready to come. I wasn't ready. Like, it had been such an ordeal.
Yeah.
There's two parts, like labor, there's an emotional part to labor as well as the physical part, and being aware of the emotional needs of yourself to soak in or to step away. Like, with Arthur, I just wanted to hold my new baby. It was so exciting. I wanted to hold this baby. But with Theo, my emotional need was, this had been way intense. I need a minute to myself to process. And, so I felt really safe. Like, and my mum was holding my baby like 2 meters from me. Like, it wasn't a big deal. But I needed to like go, whoo, that was intense. Let's have a moment as well. Like, there's that big, very big distinct shifts.
And like delivering your own placenta, right? Like birthing your placenta, it's just, you have to be just as vulnerable and just as ready and just as like mentally, fine to do that. Like, because it's sometimes like your placenta can be as big as your baby. And then sometimes it can be super small. Like, they're just like each baby, they're so unique. And, and that includes its delivery. So, it's interesting that sometimes we can birth it in like, a minute after we have our baby, like we're already ready to birth our placenta. And then other times our body is saying, nah, there's something different. And I think you were really aware of it anyway, because you're like, these people have just entered my space and I just did that all by myself. And now I'm like, I'm in a new scene. Like, there's new characters and that's not to say that they did anything crazy in that moment, but like, when someone enters your birth space, even if you so love them and so trust them, you're you automatically, as a person, the way we're designed is we assess that person, like, are they healthy? Are they like, do they look well? Like we all do that normally. So we have, it does interrupt that process. So to have people walk in, you're just like, okay, like a little bit of it. I don't really want to assess people right now. I'm assessing a baby. I'm trying to have a placenta.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So you have to be able to be super vulnerable and let go of that. And a lot of the time, if you're not ready, like you weren't, you're like, no, I need some, just leave me alone.
I do. There's a couple of things I also forget. So it's really funny because I'm not like, I'm a very confident, happy person. And in labor, I don't actually like being naked in front of people. Like, I'm just like, I love my mom, but I don't want everyone, like, I'm naked and stuff. So I remember when I tried to hop in the birth pool the first time, I actually went and put on clothes to do that. Like, I actually went and got a shirt that was a bit more like, I actually went and got specific hopping in the pool clothes. And then as soon as you reach that stage of, okay, labor is happening, all of a sudden everything's just off. And there is that like point where like you're still aware of your surroundings and you're like, okay, I'm very naked right now. Like, my sister's here and my sister-in-law and I love these people and they're my people, but I'm also really naked. So like there is that,
And there's vulnerability in being naked.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I did forget to point out the differences. So Arthur was born at 38 weeks on the dot as 8 pound 5 or 3 kilos 850. Theo was born at 39 weeks on the dot at 9.5 or 4 300. So he was a very big, chunky baby. Arthur was a long, skinny baby and Theo was really chunky. He was like 52 centimeters and really chunky, and Arthur was 54. So like there was such a big like height difference and chunk difference. And I believe that was a lot of it. Theo was so chunky. He just like getting in the birth canal, he didn't like being squished. And so he kept going, no, not for me. And that's why I think like when I did do the splits, he was like, all of a sudden there was this space. He's like, okay, I can do that now. Like, oh, there's some room. And so
there's so much room for activities.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, that's the space I like. Yeah.
So my question would be, was your birth, because it was ultimately like an accidental free birth, so was that a huge influence in your choice of free birthing the next time with Theo?
It was certainly a huge arguing point when I was debating what to do. For me, it was just, so for me, a free birth is just a home birth without a midwife. Like, that's how I'm just like, it's just a home birth. Like, I don't get it. Like, but now I do, I do get it, why there is a big difference, like why we separate them. Whereas back in the day when I was raised, it was like people would either have a midwife or they wouldn't, but it was all home birth. And so there's a big difference as to what that means. So when I was talking, like when my husband and I were talking and we just said, look, we're not clicking with these midwives. Like, we've already done it. And he was so like, I mean, we already did do it. So it was just way more just, So it definitely had that supportive factor for me. I mean, it was a good selling point to argue, like not argue, but like, when I was like rationalizing, well, we've already done it. But it was definitely, it was definitely good to know how confident I was, like, and I love that I then can explain to women why I think, if you're more of the holistic approach like me, just do it, because this is my experience. Like, so I did the medicalized route. It didn't work for me. We ended up free birthing anyway because the medicalized route wasn't right. And so it's, definitely something I do can talk about. I've got both experiences and can talk about them positively.
Yeah. I have probably 3 questions. I just wanted to know how it was and what your experience was like, just briefly, about you having such a faith and your mum having such a faith, and then your birth keeper having such a faith, and then knowing that your husband doesn't have faith. And I'm just the dynamic of that. And really it's more about like what wisdom could you impart for other mums and women who may have a partner who is or isn't maybe sitting on the fence with Freebirth and they're not Christians, and so they don't have that anchor of Christ to go, okay, well, actually, I know that my wife is fully designed in this. So yeah, just if you have any like wisdom to impart to other mums.
So this is something that I talk a lot about actually in general, and it's something that my husband and I have been talking about, is the fact that he doesn't, have a faith like mine. It's definitely, there is massive butting head, because all my decisions are because I'm held accountable by God. So all decisions I make are because they're faith-led and God-led. And yes, we all stumble, but all the decisions, like, I pick myself up and the decisions. So it is really hard when you're talking to someone who doesn't have that same conviction around God and, your faith and stuff. So it is definitely, so I talk about it openly. I talk about it. So these are my God reasons, but these are my human reasons as well. So we have it's definitely something. Yeah. Okay. I always bring God into it. I just say, look, he knows who I am, and this is, and this is, our marriage, and he comes into it like, we do blessing days with both the boys, and he stands there and hears and receives too. Yeah. So it's definitely, it is incredibly like the challenge there is incredibly, because wanting to respect, because that is something you want to do. I hear a lot of women go, oh, well, it's your birth, like who cares what your partner says? And I hear that, I really do. But you can't make a baby on your own, and you can't birth on your own if you want to continue that relationship. At the end of the day, you need to come in together, because, because if something goes wrong, you need to be there to support each other. And if something, so I think it's really hard, like, when you are on the fence, there is lots of reasons. And I do hear like women go, I had to, we birthed in hospital because my husband wasn't supportive. And I totally get that. And I'm like, I hear for you. Like, I'm here, I understand, because that's a really hard place to be. The thing that I support, what I think is really important is trusting nature as well. So if you're going to ignore the Christian aspect of it, nature does this all the time too. It's really that simple for me. Like, we are the only species that openly, involves other people in our birth. Like, when you look at even like zookeepers who are trying to save endangered animals, they still stand back and watch. Like, we're the only, like,
they don't interrupt, so they don't disturb it.
Exactly. So I try and talk like about that. Like, well, hold on, what makes us inferior to animals? Like, why are we inferior in that aspect that we need other people to take control of our birds? Like, aren't we the more highly evolved species?
Evolved.
So, evolved.
No, that's a really good point though, because, especially when you're talking to your husband and men, way that God's designed them to be very logical and problem solvers and, bless them. And so it's like, I feel like that's a really good piece of a nugget of like information to hopefully, help other women that are trying to explain what they're thinking and why they're thinking it, and to, flip it like, well, nature does it. So my other questions would be, I know that timing your contractions are like really important in both of your births. And obviously every woman is different. Sometimes I know for me, it totally was a hinder for me in my last birth and I didn't want anything to do with it. But I love hearing how it's different for other women. So can you just share a little bit of why timing your contractions was important for you, for both Arthur and Theo?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess with Arthur, so timing it really is just to know how long. It's just a data, like your recording sort of thing. I've got both my books and I like to like go through them. And we go through them and we talk about it whenever we talk about it. So we've got, my mum has this really interesting way of doing it. Like, she's got these columns, and so she writes down like the time and how long it took, intense, did I need anything during it? Like, she writes down, like, so it's a real data tracking sort of thing, as opposed to like feeling really, as And that's really it. It's just like, for me, taking photos in birth isn't important, and some women love to do that. And I guess it's just that way. We don't pay any attention to it. It's just good to know, like, as a way of going, hey, you've been laboring for a while like this is, so yeah. I just think it's really, it's just more of a data keeping, like just something to know what's happening. It's good I don't put any stock behind it. I think people put like, the medical community has this big, 3 in 10 for over an hour and then you're in active labor. Neither of my labors were 3 in 10 and I never had a rhythm. Like I would go contraction, and then nothing for, 5 minutes, and then I'd get one, and then like my labors are really sporadic. And I think it's really important to let that, like, it's okay to time your contractions if you want that data recorded, or if you want to just know what's going on. Some people but it means nothing. At the end of the day, it's just for us to be like, okay, this is what's happening. And I had nothing to do with it. It was purely me going, it's happening, or I would just start making a noise and my mum would just like press the button and then she'd stop pressing it. So it was completely behind the scenes. It wasn't something I did at all.
Yeah, it wasn't like something you had to consciously be tracking and thinking about and having the mental load of. Like that was something your mum had taken over for you, which I love, because I remember you showing me your book and just and I was like, wow, that's really like you said, some women love photos and that's a way of keeping a memory. It's like a keepsake, but like tracking your contractions, I was like, I never thought of it like that, just being like a keepsake. And it's just, that's beautiful. That's why I like asking women when they are doing something that I haven't done or never really felt called to have in my birth. It's really cool to listen to why they do it. And this is where community is, and this is where we learn from one another. And it does, you don't have to go on and do them, but it's just, just understanding one another is fantastic, and it's empowering. And my very last question would be, so you had a birth keeper, you trusted God, you knew that you had your mum, your husband, everyone, and your sister and sister-in-law, everyone was so on board. What was the main reason why you felt like you wanted to have a birth keeper?
Clean up. So for me, it's nice to have that extra support. So for us, like we talked about it, like, we had someone there for me and then someone there for Mitch and then someone there for Arthur. So it is, we did do it, like me and Mum did it on our own, and I was totally on board with that. Like I never felt insecure. I like the idea of having someone there who at least has like looked at lots of variations of normal, and we can just chat about it. It's a real good debriefing thing. It's something we can talk about leading up, just someone to throw ideas around as well. Like, some people, if you don't really know much about birth, hot towels, for instance, no one really it's such a forgotten art, and it's something that I think it's really important to like look at going, so hot towels is boiling hot towels that you put straight onto you, and there is like this crazy thing that they absorb the contraction, and you can see it, like they don't even leave a red mark. It's amazing. And so there's just, I think it's really, I think that's something that's really special to have, not important to have. You can do it on your own. It's so natural, but having someone there who you can bounce ideas off, who can be like, hey, like, have you tried kneeling with the birth pool? Like, or you can be like, I'm not comfortable. What would you like to do about that? Just sometimes it's nice to have someone who's just like, what would you like? Would you like something like, I have my mum there. Can you cut me up some watermelon? I'm not really going to do it while in labor, but can someone do it? So, for me, I had like a whole house full of people, and that was great. I am someone who's a real big fan of private birth, but for me, like that's what we needed at that time. Like with after the thought of having anyone in my house, I was like, but we needed people. They all had their own role and specific reason. And it was really lovely that all the women in my family were there to support me. And that was something really like real old school, the way that it's really done, like especially traditionally, in like, more traditional cultures and stuff still do have like, all the women. It's just, so it was really, really special for me. But and that's it. It's just, someone there who's just, I don't feel it's important
someone
to have.
That you want rather than you need.
Yes, that's it. Someone who I want there and trust and felt safe, and you build a friendship with them. like friendship.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because just again, it's all about that vulnerability, and like you were saying, you're naked in front of these people, and if you've never been naked in front, like your husband, it's one thing because you're like, this is how we made the baby, but you know, like other people, it's like I have to trust that you're not gonna like look at me or make me feel uncomfortable or be weird about this. Like this is normal and natural, and you're not seeing me as a naked woman, you're seeing me as a birthing mother, which is really big. Yeah, so no, I totally agree, because you can kind of go feel a little bit uncomfortable, and then afterwards you're like, wow, I feel really connected to you. Like,
like there is a moment where you go from I'm naked to get this baby out of me.
100%. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Amelia, for sharing your birth stories, because both of them had so much power in both of them. And I hope that God just does his thing again with every episode, that women do hear it and they feel encouraged. And so maybe we can end in prayer and we'll head out. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you so much that you have blessed Amelia with 2 wonderful, gorgeous boys. Thank you for the love that you fill her heart with for her sons and even with her husband too. And Lord, I just pray over their marriage, over their children, over their like entire family, and that you bless them abundantly. And I just thank you for the vulnerability that she's had coming onto the show today. And I just ask, Lord, that the Holy Spirit work. Holy Spirit, may you just shine your light through this whole story and stories, Lord, and that women are encouraged and they feel not condemned but convicted. They feel a sense of peace and they feel a connection towards you, Lord God, that they know that they can reach to you, and just feel so encouraged by this story. And Lord, I just thank you so much for this day, and I thank you that you've given us the ability to be able to share Amelia's birth story on the show. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the show. Tune in next week for another episode of Freebirth with Jesus.
To share your story on the show, check out our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at awaken.birth. Don't forget you can watch this episode and more on YouTube.